0 across the board. That's what my first officer said, and it's on the tape. And I hate that it is because there's a rule in you that says if the gauges say 0, you should already be dead. Cruise altitude, smooth night air, a cabin full of sleeping strangers, and then a white shape slid across our nose like somebody had thrown a sheet over the stars. It held station off our right wing, matching us with the kind of obedience you don't get from weather or traffic. It darted forward, fell back, and in the next breath, every needle on our panel swept to 0 as if they had rehearsed it. The radios hissed in a way that wasn't static so much as clean nothing. The autopilot blinked out with the sound a toy makes when a battery quits. The cabin went still in the way a room does when a child starts to understand. We waited for the stall that never came. Everything in me was shouting procedures that would get us killed if they were the only thing in the room. I heard myself say, "My airplane," and put a hand on a yoke that should have been heavier than courage. The white shape tilted like it was listening. I've logged years of nights over the Atlantic. You learn its grammar, jet stream, ride reports, the way the cabin air smells like a fair compromise between coffee and sleep. The 747 is a cathedral of momentum. You don't throw it around. You respect its patience, and it gives you a long, forgiving conversation with gravity. We were 4 in the cockpit. Captain, me, first officer, flight engineer, and a relief, running a routine eastbound leg. Cruise FL 350, Mach decimal 81. Smooth air, step climbs behind us. A stack of position reports ahead. The first hint was visual, not instrument. A white, almond shape crossing our nose left to right, far closer than traffic's allowed, with no beacon, no strobes, no wing lights. The FO said, "Traffic?" Out of habit. TCAS showed nothing. I cupped the darkness with my eyes the way you do when you want it to talk. The shape stopped where it had no right to stop. 3-4 wingspans off the right, slightly high, and held. The stars behind it were wrong. 2 of them seemed to stutter and then forgot they'd done that. Center. "Confirm traffic off our right," I called, and the frequency gave me the kind of silence you only get when a carrier is held open and nobody's on it. The FO tried VHF 2. Same. HF was a wall of night like always. The flight engineer leaned forward to check the engine instruments out of old fear. N1, EGT, fuel flow. All normal, all steady. Then the panel went theatrical. Primary flight display. Airspeed tape rolled to 0. Altitude washed to 0. Vertical speed 0. Attitude flagged with a polite red you never want to see. Engine instruments followed with the kind of betrayal that makes a person religious. Needles sweeping down to pegs, even as the thrust under our feet didn't change. Fuel showed nothing. Hydraulics said no. The FE swore once, softly, like someone stubbing a toe in a museum. The autopilot CWS light blinked out, and we dropped a handful of feet that felt like it should be 1,000. 0 across the board, the FO said, and in the same half-second, his wristwatch did a little skip, like it had been reminded of a joke. I clicked off the autopilot fully and took the yoke, not with muscle. With feel, pitch for what my inner ear and the horizon smear could still tell me. Power for what my thighs knew about thrust through the seat. The standby instruments, the little island of analog we keep as if for this, looked at us like old dogs who remember your face. The standby attitude held. The standby altimeter froze at our last good number. The standby airspeed drooped but didn't die. The yoke pressure told the truth. The airplane was still flying clean. Off the right, the white shape inched closer, then fell back, then surged forward in a motion more like intent than thrust. It held a line with us as if it had discovered a game it was too polite to win. I put in a knee's worth of rudder to test the air's loyalty. The 747 answered like she always does. The stall that should have arrived to match our instruments' insults did not. I've had systems quit. I've had radio sulk. I have not had everything declare 0 while the air refused to care. The cabin chime sounded and then repeated itself without anyone pressing it. The interphone crackled with breathing that didn't belong to any of us, then remembered its manners. I told the FO to brief the cabin without saying anything we'd have to own later. Temporary panel anomalies. Flight path normal, remain seated. He threaded the needle because that's why you hire good people. The white shape tilted, and the tilt felt like someone cocking their head to listen. I need you to picture the cockpit in dim. Panel floods down to bare because night vision is part of our bargain. 4 people doing math with body and sound. The FE calling engine parameters from memory like a litany. because the screens refuse to worship the same God. N1 feels steady. Vibe normal. Fuel press feels there. The FO hand-flying checklist we didn't have words for. Electric cycle, no effect. IRS flags, momentary blink, then a sulk. ADC fail lights, up, then out like they were embarrassed. The relief behind us with his hand on the circuit breaker map not pulling anything because the wrong pull ends stories. Watch attitude on standby. Keep it matched. Thrust set, I said. And the FO said, matched. And the FE said, thrust holding by feel. The auto throttles had let go at the same moment the AP did. My left hand sat over thrust levers like a prayer that doesn't need words. Outside, the white shape collected light without reflecting it and made edges where edges shouldn't be. We tried 3 frequencies and got 2 kinds of nothing. White silent, carrier open, no voice, and honest dead, no carrier. Guard returned hash, then someone's cough cut in and got eaten. The clock on the panel wrote 23:41:19, 23:41:19, 23:41:20. The FE looked at me like you look at someone who's supposed to be older than you and discovered you're the same age. You want me to try the alternate AC bus? He asked. I shook my head because the move from failing data to no data is a cliff, center. Clipper, we still called ourselves that sometimes out of habit and history, experiencing instrument anomalies, maintaining present level and heading by standby. Request any traffic advisories. The net rewarded me with a 7-second clean hole where a voice should live, then Clipper, unreadable, say again after, and then a carrier squeal like metal you can only hear with your teeth. The white shape surged ahead and then slid across our nose left to right, taking a slice of stars with it like a finger-lifted chalk from a board. It held at our left, closer now. Close enough that the FO's hand crept to the glare shield as if you could move a thing like that by gesture. The panel zeros glistened like lies do. The standby held, unfashionable and true. I had no interest in banking into a thing I can't brief. I kept us honest, level power where sound and seat told me it belonged. Cabin reports lights in the window's right side. The FO said after the flight attendant spoke from a voice that had opinions. Passengers are quiet, he added, which is the scariest sentence a pilot hears. There is something you don't do unless you mean it. You write in the log in the middle of a brawl. I put my pen down long enough to mark the times because later I would doubt I had the right to be alive. 2340 panel sweep to 0. 2341 duplicate second. 2341 to 2342 radios white silent. 2342 white object left wing station. Standby reliable. Flight path stable. The white shape tilted again, listening, and began to fall back. Not a retreat, more like yielding. The radios wriggled back into being with the complaint of a cat. Center called 3 flight numbers at once, then remembered how to sequence. Clipper say altitude. The FO said, standby reads 350, and I said, holding 350 by standby and feel. And center said a sentence that makes a man want to sleep for a week. We lost your mode C and speed for about a minute. Are you able present position? I gave a lat long by memory of our last waypoint and our time and our humility. The FE said, engine sync shows 0 and I can hear it synced. I don't like that math. He was right. The numbers had gone on strike. The airplane had not. I wanted to be angry. I didn't have time. Power set, I said, and nudged the levers to where sound and drag and a lifetime told me the margin felt like it should feel. There's a hum a 747 makes when lift is honest. We had it. The stall you'd expect with an airspeed tape that called us dead never arrived. The buffet that would gladly sign an affidavit about bad choices never showed. The white shape gave us one more tilt, then rose on a vector that made my gut imagine stairs where there aren't any, and the panel in front of me blinked like a child deciding to behave. Numbers came back wrong, then right. Airspeed repopulated from 0 to a value that matched the whisper on the windshield. Altitude unfroze and caught up like a late apology. Vertical speed remembered how to draw. Engine parameters acquired humility and sat where our hands had held them. TCAS coughed to life and showed the world it had been hiding. The autopilot armed, then refused, then armed again. I didn't buy what it was selling yet. We hand flew 5 more minutes like the sky was the only employee we could trust. Clipper, we have you normal on our end now. Center said with the relief people use when they don't want to ask why. Report any further anomalies. He picked that word out of a basket of worse ones. We did not mention the white thing because you can't brief a control facility and a company rumor and still fly the return. We said instrument fluctuations, transient displays, audio distortion, things that live in the house of explainable even when the house is a tent. After landing, the write-up filled a page and a half because I have the sin of being thorough. The CVR, cockpit voice recorder, played back the FO's 0 across the board. The autopilot disconnect tone, the breathing on the interphone that wasn't any of our microphones, and one moment of 7 seconds where the tape had the shape of sound but no sound. The FDR, flight data recorder, showed a dropout in ADC, air data computer data, IRS momentary flag, mode C lost, mode S nothing to brag about, then a recovery that looks like a line drawn by a nervous watchmaker. The maintenance hangar went full ritual, LRUs swapped, connectors reseated, dumps taken. Everything they touched came back normal like we had offended it, and it had chosen to forgive. The engineers asked good questions, and then the kind I love less. Static charge, solar hiccup, icing at unlikely altitudes, weeping connections, wiring loom chafe. If you give me a mundane I can own, I will marry it. What I had was a craft to our wing that obeyed us until it didn't, instruments that zeroed without the world joining them, radios that learned to be quiet, and a stall that would not sign its name. The dispatch log shows one thing I keep to myself when I want to be content with coincidence. ATC recorded our beacon code blinking out at 23:41:19. Back at 23:41:20, the CVR clock prints 23:41:19 twice. The cabin crew write-up mentions passengers describing a white light and the feeling of being watched, which is not a maintenance item. I went home and didn't sleep. I have a wife who reads my night the way I read a panel. She put a hand on my shoulder and didn't ask for explanations because we've learned the difference between an explanation and a report. For a month, my phone did a trick at 41 past the hour where it would light and not ring for 7 seconds and then change its mind. Make of that the kind of story you prefer. If you are waiting for me to say what it was, you will be disappointed in the way truth loves to disappoint. I will say how it behaved. It paced, it tilted like listening. It surged and fell back without the flight you and I know. It did not blind us. It did not cook us. It did not make the air a liar. It made our instruments into children, dramatic, clever, briefly unhelpful, while the airplane remained an adult. It taught me a sermon I wish I didn't have to learn at altitude. When the numbers abandon you, fly the airplane. Feel is not romance. It's a backup system older than firmware. Standby is not nostalgia. It's the friend who stays when the party ends. Words like event and fluctuation are what you use when encounter would make your chief pilot's coffee go down wrong if your night ever zeroes on you, if your panel decides to pretend while your hands still know the truth. If a white thing that doesn't blink paces your wing and tilts to listen, you are allowed to be afraid. You are not allowed to stop flying. We wrote the squawk. We flew the return. We didn't talk about it in the crew room because you don't sell your future for yesterday's story. But I wrote more in my personal log than company needed, because somebody has to keep track of second chances. There is a note in the margin that I didn't write for anyone but the me who woke up at 3 a.m. 30 nights after and tasted metal without a reason. 0 is a reading, not a reality. If you've ever had instruments roll to 0 while the world carried you anyway, if you've watched a clock repeat a second, if you've heard 7 seconds of clean nothing where your voice should have been, if you've seen something tilt and hold station off a wing and been polite enough not to name it in a report, leave me one word in the comments: 0. No tail numbers, no routes, no call signs, just 0. I'll read it on a day I'm not flying. The rest is Atlantic at night, a good airplane doing what a good airplane does, and a shape that does not need me to believe in it to be polite. I still fly. I still trust the autopilot like a colleague who saved you a few times and rolled his eyes about it never. I still love numbers. I also love the moment, rare and unwelcome, when you are the only witness the sky needs and your job is not to be right, but to be kind to physics while it makes room for something it doesn't advertise. 0 across the board, my FO said. He was right about the board. He wasn't right about the world. We stayed in it, and that is a sentence I'll take over answers I can't trust. The white thing never filed a flight plan. It never signed the book. It left us a minute of doubt and a story that only feels like a story until you are in the chair, hand on a yoke, telling your body to remember what lift feels like. Then it's not a story. It's a procedure you make up with a friend you've known since your first solo. We didn't stall. We didn't pray for what we weren't ready to accept. We waited for the autopilot to earn its way back. We let the air do the work we always pretend is ours. When the numbers returned, they came back one after the other like kids who know they've been out past curfew and are hoping you have a soft voice left. I did. We landed to the sound of our wheels preparing a sentence only they know how to say.